Taking things ahead and discussing about the few aspects that influence the supply of loanable funds in the economy, we would now be discussing about the government budget deficits and loanable funds. So, when we are talking about budget deficit essentially means that the government spends more than they earn. Okay, deficit is equal to revenues are less than expenditure. Taking this into account, this means that there is a negative public saving. And when we say that there is a negative public saving, it means that the supply of loanable funds reduces. Supply of funds reduces, and in turn increases the interest rates, and due to this the second effect is that interest rates would increase. Now why does this happen is because when you have the excess supply of money, or the interest rates would go down, that is the money becomes cheaper in this case. Now let's understand this with the help of a figure. In this case, the y-axis has interest rates, the x-axis measures the quantity of loanable funds, we have the demand curve in this case. Okay, and here we have the demand curve, and when we take this into account, here the earlier supply might be at S1. Okay, so here the interest rates that is determined is, let's say, R1. Okay, so at point A the interest rates are getting an equilibrium. Now because of budget deficits, the supply curve shifts upwards, and here the new supply curve is created. ओके, दैट मीन्स द सप्लाई हैज़ रिड्यूस. यहाँ पे सप्लाई कम हो गई है पर डिमांड कांस्टेंट रहती है. इसकी वजह से व्हाट हैपेंस इज दैट द rate of interest goes up. Okay, it pushes the rate of interest. Now this is the market for loanable funds. Okay, the first market that we are seeing here is the market for loanable funds. Okay, so in this manner, if it is a closed economy, this is what the impact would be, that is सप्लाई कम होगी और रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट ऊपर चला गया. रेट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट ऊपर चला गया, then people would be deferring their investment activities that they want to undertake by undertaking borrowings, and due to this again the equilibrium gets established. But when we are talking about open economy, the things becomes much more complex in this case. So let's see as to what happens in an open economy. So there are three markets that we will be taking into account. The first market is a market for loanable funds. So let's write market for loanable funds. Okay, that is the first market that we would be talking about. Then there is a net capital outflow that we will be taking into account. Now this net capital outflow and market for loanable funds together would be determining as to what would be the level of money which gets supplied into the foreign exchange market. So let's first understand as to what happens in these two markets. These two markets again, the first market, that is market for loanable funds, is the same as we discussed earlier. Here we have interest rates on y-axis, on the x-axis we have quantity of loanable funds. So here this is the demand curve, DD curve, and the S1 curve and the S2 curve, which determine the rate of interest. at R2 in the S2 case and R1 in the S1 case. So when the rate of interest, when the supply of funds reduces because of government deficit, it pushes the rate of interest upwards from R1 to R2. Now moving ahead to the net capital outflows market, because of the fact that the supply of funds has reduced and the rate of interest has increased, when we extend the impact to the net capital outflows in order to understand as to how interest rates impact the outflows. So here we have R1 and here we have R2. Here the outflows would have a negative effect on it. Why? Because when the interest rates get pushed up, okay, when the interest rates are pushed up, what happens in this case is that people prefer to invest in the domestic economy only because they are getting a higher interest rate by taking a lesser risk. So what they do is that there would be an increase in the domestic investment and there would be a reduction in the net capital outflow. Like we have already seen that S would always be equal to I plus net capital outflow. When this element is reducing, okay, when this element is reducing and this element is increasing, that is savings are increasing and capital outflows are reducing, the balancing would be done in this particular investments only, that is domestic investment. In that case becomes much more easier for the people. So what happens is that you tend to retain the money in the country only. Now taking this forward into the foreign exchange market, let's see as to how the foreign exchange market reacts. Foreign exchange, so let's write it down because I have to extend this to here. I have to extend it. So here we have the foreign exchange market. So here what happens is, like we have drawn earlier, here we have the y-axis wherein we have the exchange rate and this is the quantity of currency, okay, and this is 0 and we have the x-axis. Now taking this ahead, if we extend it over here, let me zoom it out a bit so that everything is visible in one place. So if I am extending it over here, okay, I am taking into quantities now, okay, in order to determine the supply thing, okay, I am taking the quantities and I am extending it to determine the supply. So here I am able to create one line and here I am able to create another line. This is the supply of foreign exchange and here this is the supply of foreign exchange. Now when the rate of interest was R1, the supply of foreign exchange would be SF1, whereas when the rate of interest increases to R2, the supply of foreign exchange also reduces from SF1 to SF2, and here we also find that there is a negative relation over here. So when the more supply is there in the market, the the exchange rate was E1, and when the supply reduces, the exchange rate picks up and moves ahead or moves upward and it is established at a higher level. So when the scenario, if we are taking everything together, we can say that when the government, because of the government deficit, when the supply of funds reduces from S1 to S2, the rate of interest in the loanable fund market picks up or moves up from R1 to R2, which results into reduction of net capital outflow from this point here to this point here. Due to this, what happens, the availability of foreign exchange or the supply of foreign exchange or the supply of currency in the market or our own domestic currency in the market reduces from SF1 to SF2, thereby the interest, because of the upward shift in the interest rates, we find that the exchange rate also shifts upward. So in this manner, the government budget deficits impact not just the loanable fund market, but they impact the net capital outflows as well as the foreign exchange market as well.